Abe Applebaum is who the town of Willowbrook describes as a kid detective. From his unorganized house, which he shares with Corey, his roommate, to his parents still bringing him groceries despite his age, it's clear he hasn't grown into the man everyone expected. Mr. Applebaum asks about his finances, reminding him they won't be bailing him out again. Abe replies that he just had a big case, which excites Mrs. Applebaum. Their excitement quickly fades, however, when he reveals what the case was.
This gay guy wanted me to find out whether another guy was gay.
Later, Abe heads to the bar, but it doesn't lift his spirits. He was once adored as a kid detective. At 13, he solved the case of missing fundraiser money catching Rory Beans, the neighborhood knucklehead. He started out running his trade from a treehouse, taking kids' cases and being paid in quarters. When the treehouse was chopped down, the town raised enough money to set him up with a real office on Main Street. His secretary was Gracie Gulliver, the mayor's daughter, who he paid in soda pop. Soon, adults began hiring him, mostly to find missing items or figure out small mysteries. He always delivered, which earned him everyone's admiration. But when Gracie was abducted, the town expected Abe to succeed where the police failed. The pressure weighed heavily on him. Though no one said it to his face, they all thought it. Unfortunately, this was the case he couldn't solve. Now, at 32, the town no longer loves him. He's stuck chasing trivial cases, living an unfulfilled life. In his office, Lucy, his secretary, tells him a girl is waiting for him. The girl introduces herself as Caroline, and he suggests she take a bottle of water. Using the intercom, he tells Lucy to get one, but she asks where she's supposed to get water from. Abe tells her to go to the store, leaving Lucy in disbelief. Caroline, overhearing the exchange, feels awkward and tells Abe not to bother, but he insists on playing it cool. Looking at his wall of framed recognition, Caroline notices how dated they are and asks when he last solved a case. Abe claims he solves them all the time, but the papers stopped printing his photo. Yeah, right. Spotting a picture of Abe as a child with Mayor Gulliver, she recognizes the mayor, who later committed suicide by hanging. To lighten the mood, Abe mentions the mayor also founded the Potato Festival. Caroline explains she's been to his office before, 5 years earlier, when he solved the case of her stolen silver brooch at her 11th birthday party in under an hour. Abe can't recall it, but she reminds him he asked which of her friends ate the most cake. Asking those kinds of questions is an old trick for Abe, because memory is extremely selective. That way, the person is telling him who she trusts less without even realizing. Lucy eventually returns with the water, annoyed at the errand. Once she leaves, Caroline explains why she's really there. She wants Abe to solve a case. Her boyfriend was murdered, stabbed 17 times. Abe is stunned, since it's the first serious case he's ever gotten in life. Later, at family dinner, he shares the news. Caroline's boyfriend was the young man found in the river weeks earlier, and the police are getting nowhere with the local youth. Abe admits that Caroline hired him to find out what happened. Mr. Applebaum is surprised by this, and Abe explains he worked for her years ago. He told her he'd think about it, but Mr. Applebaum insists he can't take it. Abe demands to know why, and his father says it wouldn't be fair since Abe has no experience. Abe protests, claiming he's solved over 200 mysteries. Mr. Applebaum shoots back, asking how many of those were murders. He accuses Abe of taking advantage of Caroline's naivete, which infuriates him. Abe insists she isn't paying him. That only makes his father question why he's doing it at all. He asks if Abe is still working for quarters. Furious, Abe slams the table, yelling that he is Abe Applebaum, the boy who solved the missing time capsule case at 12, earning the mayor's key to the city. The table becomes so tense and quiet that one could hear a pin drop, and Abe tries to rein in his temper.
Finally, after all this time, somebody trusts me. The real case. Chance to prove myself. You're telling me I shouldn't take it?
His father has no response. Mrs. Applebaum tries to soothe him, but he cuts her off, saying she's being patronizing. The next day, Caroline meets him in his office with a picture of Patrick, her late boyfriend. Abe asks if she's heard of the Red Shoe Gang. She affirms, explaining everyone knows not to go near the boiler room, their hangout. Abe, confused, recalls it used to be called the Steamer. Caroline wonders what that has to do with Patrick, and Abe points out that he was stabbed 17 times. She still doesn't understand the relationship, so he decides to explain further.
Usually when that happens, it's because you've pissed off the wrong people.
He asks if Patrick was involved in drugs, but Caroline denies this. She insists Patrick never touched drugs. Abe presses further, asking about gambling or demon worship, but Caroline is adamant. Patrick wasn't involved in anything like that. When asked about Patrick's home life, she explains his parents were very strict, and he was a top student with the highest grades. Abe suggests the pressure might have been too much, but Caroline insists he was good, motivated, and wanted to succeed. Well, in Abe's line of work, one thing is quickly learnt: everybody has secrets. No matter how simple a case may seem, it's always shocking what one can find. Their investigation begins with Patrick's friend Billy, whose family owns the butcher shop. Abe privately mentions he suspects Billy's father is homosexual, leaving Caroline stunned, though he warns her not to reveal it. Billy arrives, skeptical when introduced to Abe. Caroline insists he's an amazing detective who will solve Patrick's murder, but Billy isn't impressed. He asks how many murders Abe has actually solved. Abe dodges this by asking about Patrick's connections to the kids on the stoop or the wild geese. Billy dismisses him, telling Caroline that Abe has no idea what he's doing. Annoyed, Abe blurts out that Billy's father is gay. Billy just walks away. That sure didn't go well. Next, they visit Calvin, another friend of Patrick. While Calvin goes upstairs, Abe quietly cracks a window open. It's another one of Abe's old tricks. Always open a window whenever you're invited, in case you need to sneak back in. Back in the living room, Calvin reveals Patrick wasn't the perfect boyfriend Caroline believed. His examples? Patrick hoarded bottle caps, lied about books and movies, and was impatient with disabled people. Abe wonders if Patrick was cheating, since Calvin seems eager to paint him badly. Then Calvin drops a bombshell. Patrick had a second girlfriend. Though Calvin never met her, he knows she was wild, from the things Patrick bragged about. Abe presses for details, and Calvin whispers the vulgar things Patrick and this mysterious girl did together. He might as well have spoken aloud, because Caroline hears every word. Apparently, Patrick kept a photo of her in his locker, where the girl wore nothing but a tiger mask. Caroline refuses to believe it, but Calvin swears it's true. Later at a restaurant, Caroline stares blankly, struggling to process. She always thought Patrick was different. He used to leave origami roses in her locker on test days. Abe asks how she knew they were from him, but Caroline insists it was obvious since Patrick was the only Asian in their school. Seeing her tears, Abe asks if she wants to continue. Caroline says yes, since it won't feel real until she understands. Abe lays out the next course of action, which is breaking into the school and checking Patrick's locker for the photo. That night, they break in. Caroline leads him to Patrick's locker, but the police have already cleaned it out. Luckily, she kept Patrick's jacket in hers. They find students hanging around, and Caroline calls them overnighters, students who usually stay in school over the weekend. Searching the jacket, Abe only finds wads of used tissues until he pulls out a pill bottle. Back home, he inspects one pill and calls Lucy, asking her to connect him with her dealer. She refuses, telling him to talk to the kids on the stoop. Left with no choice, Abe swallows the pill himself, determined to know what it does firsthand. The next day, Caroline drives him to the stoop, which is really just a concrete divider where teens loiter. Abe shows them the pill and asks what it is, even offering to trade the whole bottle for information. They explain it's called an ego booster, a drug that heightens self-esteem and gets you high. Abe wonders why he doesn't feel anything, but Jace, the ringleader, says it depends on how insecure you normally are. The kids mock him, but he ignores them. He learns a bottle sells for $1,000. When he asks for the supplier, Jace lies, claiming it comes from Hepburn's candy store. Abe and Caroline drive across town, only to discover Hepburn doesn't sell drugs. Furious, Abe storms back to the stoop and slaps Jace. The others scatter in fear, but he roughs Jace up until the truth comes out. The suppliers are actually the Red Shoe Gang. Abe takes his pill back, tosses Jace under the bridge, and heads to the steamer. There he asks to see Clive, the gang's leader, and is granted access after being searched. Fueled by the pill, he confronts Clive about Patrick. Clive glares at him, then bluntly turns him down. As if the drugs suddenly wear off, Abe leaves deflated, lying to Caroline that Clive wasn't there. They then visit Patrick's parents. It's been 2 weeks and the police have offered no answers. Abe says investigators get too caught up in physical evidence, ignoring psychological details. Mr. Chang asks what he means, and Abe asks about Patrick's favorite fruits. Mrs. Chang tells him it's bananas, which Abe interprets as a sign of depression since bananas require no effort to eat. However, Mr. Chang disagrees. Abe shows them the pills, explaining what they are. Mr. Chang believes someone planted them, and Abe wonders if it's to make it look like a drug killing. Displeased, Mr. Chang wonders if this hasn't occurred to him, but Abe straightens himself, saying he's open to all possibilities. When he mentions Patrick cheating, Mr. Chang demands proof. Abe admits he only heard it from a friend, who also claimed Patrick had a photo hidden in his locker, one he never saw himself. Mr. Chang is angry at this point, questioning if Abe is truly a detective or just some fool who believes whatever he's told. Abe insists he's solved over 200 cases, but lies when asked how many were murders, claiming 3. Mr. Chang just stares at him before leaving the sitting room. Left alone with Abe, Mrs. Chang shows him a picture of Patrick.
He was a very private boy. We didn't even know about Caroline until she called us after his death. It's difficult to accept that you didn't know everything when you've loved someone so thoroughly.
Abe promises not to rest until the case is solved and the family finds peace, but she tells him not to make such a promise because it's silly. With permission to keep the picture, he leaves. In the car, Abe gets a call from Lucy, who has tracked down Tiger Girl, the second girlfriend, through social media. Her name is Melody, and Abe pays a visit to her house. Her mother answers with a cigarette on her lips, directing Abe to the basement where Melody is. Surprisingly, Melody has a guy's name written across her forehead, and she explains he paid her $50 to do it. They talk about Patrick, and she mentions the Red Shoe Gang. They preferred recruiting dealers who were the smartest kids, top of their class, since they wouldn't easily be suspected. When Abe rejoins Caroline in the car, she points out a vehicle that seems to be following them, and he decides to find out. She drives, and Abe realizes they are indeed being trailed. He makes her pull over. He eventually steps out to confront the car when Caroline tells him to go check. Without his pills, Abe isn't so confident, but he walks toward the car anyway. It turns out to be his parents, leaving Abe in disbelief. Furious, he tells them to leave, then returns to Caroline's car. Unable to admit the truth without humiliating himself, he tells her it was just reporters hoping to follow their trail and break the case. Later, they arrive at Abe's office, where Caroline explains she won't be much help the next day since it's a school day. Her parents passed away when she was little, so she stays with her grandparents. Still, it has always felt like some other presence was watching over her. The next day, Abe visits Principal Irwin, saying he wants to discuss Patrick and revealing that Caroline hired him. Irwin agrees to help, but only if Abe helps with his own case.
One of the custodians found some broken beakers in the science lab this morning.
Abe dismisses it as the work of overnighters, explaining what that means, then redirects the conversation back to Patrick. Irwin reveals he had been warned Patrick might be mixed up in something a week before his death. Lo and behold, the informant was Calvin. Irwin admits he checked Patrick's locker, but found nothing. Through the intercom, Abe's secretary tells him about a fight the kids are involved in, making Abe frustrated. He admits the kids have no concept of authority and feels there's more nobility in just giving up. Next, Abe sneaks into Calvin's house through the unlocked window. While snooping, he eats one of the homemade donuts and moves to the room to check Calvin's computer. The system needs a password, so Abe searches through a drawer. He pockets a chocolate bar and finds a letter Calvin wrote, expressing feelings for a girl who's in a relationship he resents. Abe also pockets that too. Back at the computer, he guesses the password and gains access. He finds a math test quiz on display, but incoming footsteps force him to hide in the closet. Calvin enters, confused by the active screen, but brushes it off and starts playing music while using the computer. Hours pass with Calvin still playing his music and gaming, leaving Abe stuck inside the closet. Abe finally manages to slip out when Calvin is called downstairs to set the table. He tries escaping, coming down gingerly on the creaking stairs, but his plans are thwarted when Calvin's sister begins running upstairs, forcing him back to the closet. To make matters worse, she picks up on the game Calvin was playing. Seems like someone is indeed sleeping in the closet. That night, after being tucked in, the little girl hears a sneeze from the closet. Abe ends up at the police station where Constable Cleary reprimands him for his actions. He traumatized the poor girl, and her parents are furious. Abe reveals the work he's doing, asking him what they've gotten so far. However, Cleary can't discuss an open investigation. Abe wonders why he never called back after Gracie was kidnapped, but Cleary says he was 12. This doesn't justify anything for Abe since he's helped Cleary before. Cleary insists it wouldn't have looked right for a case of that magnitude. He promises to convince Calvin's family not to press charges. However, he tells Abe the detective work must stop.
Gracie was not your responsibility, but neither is this. You can't run around calling yourself a detective and expect everyone else to play along.
Though Cleary has always liked him, he feels everyone has to grow up eventually, and maybe this is Abe's time. Picked up by his parents, Abe returns home and resorts to playing video games. Lucy calls, telling him he's made the paper again, but the story reports he was caught doing improper things in a little girl's bedroom. Abe sinks back into his life of useless cases and wasted days in front of the TV, ignoring Caroline's calls. One morning, Caroline shows up at his house. He excuses his absence, blaming it on his non-existent work. She shows him another origami rose, but Abe isn't surprised. He reveals they never came from Patrick, because origami is Japanese. Patrick only took the credit because Caroline started talking to him. He tells her it was probably Calvin, since Calvin is in love with her. Caroline is shocked by this revelation, and Abe gives her the note before shutting the door in her face. Inside, he sniffs up more ego booster pills, unable to escape thoughts of Gracie. The next morning, he wakes up in a dumpster, lying down just the way God made him with no memory of how he got there. After crawling out and finding his clothes, he gets a call from Caroline, who reminds him he called her last night and promised not to rest until the case was solved. Clearly, he had gone too hard on the drugs. He freshens up at her house, apologizing for her seeing him that way. He admits he was arrested, but Caroline already knows. Lucy showed her the paper when she visited his office. He explains how he used to be admired in town until he fell behind.
It's difficult to accept the difference between who you are in your head and who you are in the world.
Caroline relates, saying people always see her as a little girl, even Patrick. Abe advises her not to blame herself for his actions since experience is overrated. It's been a while Abe has met someone like her, and it reminds him of why he got into the business. At the office, he is shocked at the mess Lucy has left, finding her asleep after having friends over. On his desk lies another origami rose, left by Caroline. Spreading it out and inspecting it closely, he immediately notices something. Heading to his parents' house, he asks for the garage key and digs through his case boxes on Gracie. Shockingly, he discovers the same pattern of origami paper Caroline received. After hours of research and pinning various notes and pictures to his crime board, he calls Caroline, warning her to stay home the next day because it isn't safe. The origamis aren't coming from Calvin. The next morning, Abe visits Mrs. Gulliver, who assumes he's found her cat, a job she gave him earlier. But Abe is there to talk about Gracie. She leads him to her daughter's preserved bedroom, where he finds an origami rose in the drawers. Mrs. Gulliver has no idea where it came from. She urges him to find her cat since she's a lonely woman. Losing both a daughter and husband has been unbearable. At the bar, Abe tries to clear his head with a drink, and the bartender brings up his fight with Rory. Rory beat Abe badly, and the bartender suggests he should just apologize. Abe refuses, but when he learns Rory never stole the fundraiser money, he is stunned. He replays every past conversation in his head and suddenly rushes out. He calls Lucy, asking her to check the date on the first Rory Beans case. He believes Rory may have been set up. Abe admits he might finally know who is really making the flowers. Breaking into another house, Abe rummages around and finds a small safe box. After picking the lock, he discovers the picture Calvin had mentioned, the one of Melody in the tiger mask. Just then, he hears a sound and quickly puts it back. This time, he hides under the bed instead of the closet. Soon, a man walks in, notices the pin on the floor, and immediately calls out to Abe, knowing he must be there. It's Irwin. Now seated for a conversation, he demands to know what Abe is doing in his house. Abe reminds him of the first case he gave him, saying he had implicated the wrong kid. He realizes Irwin was only testing him, trying to see how his head worked and whether he was really as smart as people claimed. Irwin asks why he would do such a thing, but Abe replies that Gracie was kidnapped a week after the fundraiser theft. Irwin wants to know what exactly Abe is asking, and Abe bluntly asks if he's the bad guy. Irwin warns him of the weight of such accusations, but Abe mentions the stolen picture. He explains it wasn't Caroline in the photo, leaving Irwin taken aback. Abe also reveals the origami flowers, insisting Irwin murdered Patrick because he wanted someone innocent and untouched, just like Gracie.
He thought he'd ruined her for you.
Irwin finally confesses, saying Gracie wasn't innocent.
She used to stop by my office just to show me her outfits.
Abe is horrified, pointing out she was only 14, but Irwin dismisses age, insisting Abe of all people should understand that age is insignificant.
That girl got what she always wanted. She would have loved to see this place. Her face on every telephone pole. For a month, the whole country knew her name.
Abe feels crushed that he didn't see it and save Gracie, but Irwin says no one expected him to since he was just a kid. When Abe asks what happened to Gracie, Irwin admits she didn't last long. Her spirit broke after he gave their daughter away. Abe is stunned, and even more so when Irwin reveals that the daughter is Caroline. He left her on the steps of a church, and his only consolation was watching her grow with grace and sensibility. To him, he had restored balance, giving something good for the beauty he took. He congratulates Abe on solving his first murder case, and when Abe asks what comes next, Irwin pulls out a pocket knife. Though terrified, Abe says he isn't afraid of him, but Irwin just smiles. He insists no one is.
There's a reason I always obliged you, Abe. We both know how it feels when nobody takes you seriously. Now they'll know what we were capable of.
He suddenly plunges the knife into his chest, pulls it out, and stabs himself again. Abe is horrified as Irwin slowly loses consciousness. He suddenly coughs up blood, making Abe jump in fear before he finally passes away. Shaken and sick, Abe grabs a bottle from the fridge and drinks, trying to process what just happened. Remembering something, he checks the fridge again and notices bottles of soda pops, the very ones Gracie used to drink. Looking outside, he spots a shed in the yard. When he opens it, he is stunned to find it filled with origami roses and a grown-up Gracie. He calls Mrs. Gulliver to tell her he's found her daughter, leaving her shocked. Gracie's return becomes a national news story for weeks, and Abe is awarded a medal by the governor. He and Rory reconcile with a handshake. The town's attitude toward Abe changes overnight, and the Potato Festival is celebrated for the first time in 18 years. Later, Caroline visits Abe at his office, noting how bare it looks now. He's taken down his old recognition frames, thinking they looked stupid. When he asks if she has returned to school, she says no. No one knows how to talk to her. Even her grandparents are confused since they thought she was a gift from Jesus, and not some pedophile. Still, she feels it's better to know the truth, and at least Abe saved Gracie. Abe asks if Gracie has reached out, but Caroline says she's just a kid. At home, Abe's parents visit and are impressed by how clean the place is. Without Corey as a roommate, Abe feels lighter. But when they ask if he's alright, his composure breaks, and he bursts into tears. If you've made it to the end, hit the like button, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next recap.